Hello, and welcome to another episode of Gossip Finance, where I am your host, Alasius Inger.
And I am Duncan Sandlin. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you, Lacey?
Well, geez, you know what? It is 2024 now, and we are off to the races, some of which are election races.
So I have to apologize. I know we were a little sparse over the last couple of weeks from the holidays. We were busy. We plugged some stuff in. But anyway, we're going to jump in today. It's going to be actually kind of fun. We're going to talk about Trump and the election disqualifications. We're going to talk about some of the problems with the Supreme Court. Lauren Boebert is trying to run away from her district and find solace somewhere else. And then we're going to talk about Turning Points USA and their women shouldn't vote policy. And then we'll jump into how Joe Rogan is not a bright individual. He's an idiot. Let's just say he's an idiot. And then we'll talk about the economy, and then we'll do some financial planning stuff. So I hope everybody's ready. Are you ready? Are you jazzed?
I'm ready.
All right. So first thing, Trump, Colorado disqualified him from the ballot. Maine also disqualified him from the ballot. There are 5 other states. I know Oregon, where I live, is one of them. Michigan is one of them. But he's going to fight this in the Supreme Court, and they just pushed an appeal to the Supreme Court. But the question is what is the Supreme Court going to do? Because they haven't really answered this question yet at this point. I think they will have to take it up, but the question is how do they answer it? So let's look at a couple little clips here about what people think is going on, because it's really fascinating. Because this has not been an issue since Nixon.
The Michigan Supreme Court has rejected an appeal seeking to keep former President Trump off the state's 2024 ballot. The watchdog group Free Speech for People filed the challenge seeking to bar Trump from the ballot on constitutional grounds. They argue the 14th Amendment bars anyone who was engaged in insurrection from running for office, and that Trump's actions on January 6th disqualify him from holding office again. Let's bring in senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky for more on this. Good to see you again, Aaron.
You too.
So this, of course, comes after Colorado's Supreme Court came to the opposite conclusion, ruling that Trump would be kept off that state's primary ballot. That case now appears headed for the U.S. Supreme Court. So what happens next? How significant, I guess, is this decision today?
Well, it's significant in that we now have competing views. Although the Michigan Supreme Court did not weigh the issues the way the Colorado Supreme Court did, it just declined to hear.
So the Michigan Supreme Court, I'm going to qualify this real quick. So the Michigan Supreme Court, they changed the thing. They said, okay, well, we're not going to say he's not disqualified from the primary ballot, but the actual election ballot, yeah, the Secretary of State might be able to say that. That was their whole position. We can't tell the Republican primary what to do because they're private. But we could potentially
that. Right.
Yeah. So Colorado, on the other hand, said, no, we're going to disqualify him from the primary. You can't even put him on the primary. Right. So Colorado actually levied a demand and a restraint on the Republican Party for the primary. Michigan said, nope, we'll hold off, but we still reserve the right to withhold him. The Secretary of State reserves the right to withhold him from the actual ballot. You can elect him on the primary. We don't give a shit. But it's even worse because Maine basically ruled the same way Colorado did. But this guy's nailing
hear the appeal. So we don't know what additional arguments may have been made, whether something new may have been brought to the fore in Michigan. The Supreme Court simply affirmed the decision of 2 lower courts to say that Trump belongs on the ballot and that the challenges by the group that you mentioned just didn't need to be heard at the highest level. But it does now present an interesting dichotomy because you have competing decisions in the states. So it does seem ripe for U.S. Supreme Court review.
Meaning that other states may just pick a side at this point because there seems to be a case for either side to be made.
Well, in some ways, yes. And there are decisions pending in more than a dozen states where legal challenges to Trump's ballot eligibility have been filed. Now, some of those are left to the courts. In the case of Maine, for example, it's left to the Secretary of State. And we're expecting a decision from the Secretary of State in Maine any day now. Mm-hmm. So
she already ruled that he can't.
So he can't
be on the ballot.
He can't, and that's the primary ballot.
Yeah, so that's the Secretary of Maine. So the question becomes this, and this is where it gets really confusing in the Constitution, right? Typically, these sorts of things are left to the states, and primarily the voting is left to the Secretary of State. And unless you're a business owner, you have no idea who your Secretary of State is. Right? I mean, I know who mine is. I go on the website all the time. I see her face all the time. I pay taxes to them all the time. I know who they are, right? But they get the final say on a lot of these things. Now, the question is, does the Supreme Court take this issue up? Because it'll be difficult, because if you have some states saying, well, no, he can't be on the ballot, and some states saying, yes, he can be in a national election, that's a big discrepancy, right? Now, here's the issue where it gets really convoluted.
All right, hit us with it, because I'm thinking off the top of my head, I feel like, well, I guess I feel kind of like two things. It takes things a long time to end up at the Supreme Court. So that's already interesting issue on something with such a time frame to it. It'd have to, push it to the front of the line. But also, to a degree, on something that big, it would be a hard thing for them to say they weren't going to take up, so, kind of feel like they almost are going to have to.
So here's what happened. So the Colorado Supreme Court said, okay, we're going to withhold him from the ballot, right? But we'll put a stay on that if the Supreme Court takes up this case. The final deadline they gave was January 5th, which is, as of this filming, is tomorrow. So the Supreme Court has to make a decision quick, because otherwise he won't even be on the fucking primary ballot. So now we've got a whole big issue here. The other issue comes down to, is this a federal issue or is this a state issue? Right? So this puts the conservative Supreme Court in a bind. Right? Because you're either going to say, no, we're federally going to say X. So the states don't have a say in this. So we're going to take away states' rights. Or they're going to have to say, well, we're going to leave it at the states. So they're in a tough position here. The other position they're in is, okay, they're primarily conservative. 3 of them were appointed by Trump of the 9. And 6 of the 9 are all very conservative. So you have a couple arguments you could play. You could play the, well, I don't know, maybe the 13th Amendment doesn't apply to the presidency. It just applies to every other office. So then you're giving the president special powers and immunity.
Right.
Which is a labored argument. That's a tough argument. The other argument they could make is, well, you have to convict of an insurrection before you can do that. Which discounts the entire point of the 13th Amendment, because it was done during the Civil War, and we didn't convict any of those people. We just barred them from office.
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm sorry to say, though, it kind of feels like the Supreme Court's making shit up at this point, though.
Well, they have been for a long time, but the question is do they take this? If they take it, they're going to humiliate themselves. No matter what they do, they're just going to make themselves a joke. Not that they already are. It's just going to be worse.
I was going to say, it's kind of going that direction.
Right. I mean, it's like being a clown, but now I'm going to stick the cucumber, up my hole. Kind of thing. I mean, it's really embarrassing. Like super embarrassing. So we'll see what they do on that whole issue, but that's the question: is do they take it? Which they probably should. But if they take it, they can't make the decision that they should make, and they know that. And that's the problem. Because
Right.
they're so beholden to all this other shit. I mean, it's a joke. So
yeah, and I mean, think about if they were to override states' rights in an electoral process.
As Republicans,
yeah,
it's amazing that the Democrats, we're the states' rights people now, aren't we? It's amazing how that happened.
Yeah. You'd have to have all these Supreme Court justices say no states' rights on this.
Yeah. No, it's ridiculous. So let's flip to this. So this is Andrea Mitchell, and she has got. I wish we could get panelists like this. This is an amazing panel. But watch them just talk about this for like a minute.
Joining me now is Andrew Weissman, former FBI General Counsel and former senior member of the Mueller investigation, and Adam Liptak, Supreme Court reporter for the New York Times. So, Andrew, first to you, what is your reading of the Trump appeal to Maine Superior Court, first of all, on this issue?
Let me qualify this. So Trump appealed this. He appealed it to the Maine Superior Court. It's probably going to get kicked up at the Supreme Court. We'll see what they do. But his appeal, he never mentioned, well, I guess they did mention the insurrection once, really briefly. But his whole thing was he had immunity and all this other stuff. It's really embarrassing.
And it's the same effect as Colorado's, but different procedures in the two states.
Absolutely. So in Colorado, that case went all the way already to the Colorado Supreme Court, so the highest court in that state. And the Republican Party has sought cert to the Supreme Court of the United States. Donald Trump has not yet sought to seek cert as himself as well. So that remains to be seen whether he too will do that. I'd be surprised if he doesn't. Now in Maine, we're in a slightly different situation because we have the Secretary of State who you just played a clip of. She made her decision. That's the proper way that procedure works in Maine. They're entitled to have their own processes. And then it goes to Maine State Court. And so there has been appeal there. And ultimately that.
So look, these are the challenges right now. So pending challenges to whether he should be on the ballot: Oregon, California, Nevada, Wyoming, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Wisconsin. Colorado and Maine are the only ones who've already decided.
Well, so there are two states that decided he is not qualified, and two states have decided to dismiss it, which means he can be on the ballot.
Yeah. And then there's what?
2 and 2.
1, 2, 3, 4.
West Virginia.
5,
West
6,
Virginia
7,
and Arizona are allowing him, and Maine and Colorado are not.
Right. And there are 15 states that are saying we should take him off, that are arguing about that now. It's amazing. I mean, we haven't really grappled with this in our lifetime. I mean, the idea that a president could be, or a presidential candidate, especially a former president, could be just ripped off the ballot. And yeah, I don't know, maybe you're a Trump supporter, maybe you're not, you can agree or disagree with it, but the bottom line is, did he incite an insurrection? Now, the question is, the Supreme Court's going to ask is, well, can we prove that? Has he been convicted of it? That would be, I think that would be the way they would weasel out of this whole thing. Right? I think the reality would be, you don't really have to prove it. Not to the, like, you know, the extent of like a criminal case, like, you know, beyond reasonable doubt. I think it would be more like civil case. Preponderance of the evidence. Yeah, he did. He tried to overthrow. Right. He tried to overthrow democracy, and if you watch what he's saying on TV now, he's trying to do it again. He wants to do it again. He's talking about. He's like, yeah, I'll be a dictator. He's fucking said it. He fucking said that. So we'll see how it plays out. But I mean, the analysis here is it's what is going to happen, because this is going to affect our economy, our lives, our democracy, how we live going forward. I mean, if they let this guy slide, I mean, it's going to be a whole new world.
That will work its way up to it.
Was that you?
What's the timeline? Yeah, that's me. What's the timeline in which this would have to be heard and decided on by the Supreme Court, though, in order to force people to put him on the ballot? Because I think if it's heard by the Supreme Court of the United States, I think they'll weasel him out of it. That's not what I want to happen, but it's what I think they'll do. But the timeline here feels really critical and pretty hairy, although I don't know exactly what it is. How fast would they have to manage to do that?
Well, so I'm with you. I think here's the deal, and this is the big question, because the Supreme Court hasn't said they'll take it up yet. We'll probably hear by this Friday. So what? January 6th, 2 days from now, or a day from now, or tomorrow, actually. Sorry. But we'll hear about whether or not they're going to do it. But the bottom line is, if they don't, Colorado has set the limit at the 5th, which is tomorrow, Friday, January 5th. So
wait, what does that mean?
Colorado will rip him off the primary ballot tomorrow. If the Supreme Court, they don't have to rule, but they have to say, we'll take the case. And then Colorado will keep their stay. Maine has said the same thing. We will stay it if the Supreme Court takes it. If they don't take it by X date, all bets are off. Now, the bottom line is, does the Supreme Court take it? And like you said, if they do take it, I'm with you. I think they'll try to weasel the way out of it.
Right. Yeah, I believe that.
I think they'll chicken shit out. You know, I don't think our Supreme Court has any sort of balls or chutzpah or care for the American people. I think they're a bunch of fucking bought off corrupt shills.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way it's become, you know?
Yeah, but we'll see how it plays out. But this is going to change how the fluctuation of the country moves. Because there is a chance, honestly, that the Supreme Court goes, you know what, this is just too hot of a potato, and we are in too much fucking trouble right now. Maybe we just back the fuck off, and we just don't touch it. They might say that. I'm not saying they will. Reasonably speaking, there's a lot of pressure that they should do something, but what are they going to do? What argument are they going to propose? The main argument they can propose is, well, the 13th Amendment doesn't apply to the presidency because it's not specific. So they're arguing form over substance. Right, which everybody knows, and it'll be a fucking joke.
Yeah.
And they'll just hurt themselves even more. Which is why a lot of the states, like I live in Oregon, and they call us, sanctuary cities and shit like that. You know why? Because we don't abide by the Supreme Court. Why? Because they're corrupt.
Right.
And if they don't like it, they can come here and they can bring the military in and they can try and enforce it. Enjoy that.
Right.
I mean, eat our dicks, man. States' rights. You guys argued for years. Here it is. You just don't like it when we do it.
The state courts there, and ultimately it may too, like Colorado, wend its way to the Supreme Court of the United States. So those are the sort of two processes in those two different states.
And this, of course, is all on the 14th Amendment and the constitutionality. And I guess, Adam, first question would be, do you think, knowing the court as you do, that Chief Justice Roberts is going to try to avoid a Bush v. Gore decisive decision on this and try to find something that involves due process, the fact perhaps that there's been no charge of insurrection or something to try to get an exit ramp for the court?
I do think he's going to want to avoid a divisive decision like Bush v. Gore. He's going to want to avoid a decision that splits 6-3 with the 6 Republican appointees in the majority, the 3 Democratic appointees in dissent. I don't think he's going to be eager to decide whether Trump's conduct amounted to engaging in insurrection. So there may be some technical ways to avoid the issue by calling it a political question, say, by saying Congress has to enact enabling legislation before the courts can act. But it's a tricky thing. And I think it's quite unwelcome at the court. But at the same time, this question really would seem to need a national resolution. And I think it's more likely than not that the court hears the Colorado case and decides it pretty quickly.
So, I mean, he's right. It's kind of unfortunate that he's right, but I think he's right. It's like we were just talking about. I think they're going to weasel their way out. That's what he just said.
Yeah.
The thing he added is they don't want to bring this to an issue. And it's like, okay, well, I'm sorry, you're the court. If you're not going to stand up for justice, what the fuck good are you?
No good. No good at all, really.
I'm sorry, it just frustrates the shit out of me. It's like, you're the Supreme Court. I mean, and you're going to sit there and you're just going to capitulate because you don't want to deal with the politics? You're the court. You guys have lifetime...
You find up to have to deal with all of the everything.
You guys have lifetime appointments. That's the whole point of giving you lifetime appointments, is that you don't have to fucking deal with the politics. You shouldn't be dealing with the politics. You shouldn't be taking bribes and doing other shit. You should be the court, and you should just say, no, this is what it is.
But they are taking bribes.
Absolutely. So that brings us to our next fun issue. So here's Alex Wagner.
Segue.
Good job, Lacey. Nice segue.